You're listening to Two Tone Uncensored, the best damn Tennessee Titans podcast out there. I'm your host, Ryan Moreland. We have a very big show for you today, a lot to talk about. And I decided I didn't want to just talk by myself. You know, I've been doing that a lot lately. So I brought on good friend and big Titans fan and writer, Cody Milhole. How you doing, Cody?
Hey, man, doing great. Expecting another good show, just like the last was when we was on.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to get into this. We have a lot to talk about because so many coaching hires. Last week I promised all of you that we would get on and start talking about some of these free agents on our team and what we should do with them. Should we really go? So a lot of moving parts, a lot of stuff to talk about. So we're going to just jump right into it. And, last week I had the opportunity, Cody, when you weren't on, to talk about Mike Vrabel and the hiring and how I felt about it. So before we get into the other coaches, which I haven't gotten a chance to talk to about on the show, how do you feel about Mike Vrabel and this hiring?
Well, to be honest with you, when he was first hired, it was kind of a hire. I didn't hate it, but I didn't necessarily love it either, just because of his experience. He doesn't have a lot. But I do like some of the things he's done there at Ohio State, also there with the Texans, and as a player in the league before that. So he's definitely done some good things. About his press conference, I done a few pros and cons to him. One of the pros is he doesn't want to have the best players. He wants to have the right players, and we know that's important. That's something Malarkey talked a lot about with his leadership and things of that sort. So that's also very important, which we already knew. He wants to do his best by Mariota. He wants to build his game around what Mariota can do best and what he's not doing as good, I guess you could say. And something Malarkey didn't do too much. Malarkey more of, this is my way, this is how we're going to run it. And he did compromise a little bit, but not enough, I don't think. And I liked how he's willing to take responsibility. He's the head coach. If we win, it's on him. If we lose, it's on him. If we have a bad play, it's on him. He's willing to take responsibility. One thing I didn't like was he didn't really have much of an identity when he talked about our offense, RPOs, screens, taking shots. There wasn't much identity there. And if you look back to 2013, we had a coach, Ken Wisenhunt. He said our identity is versatility, and that's not an identity. That's what you have, not what you are. And there was a few times where he could be a little bit cocky. At first he was a little shy. Then he kind of got more comfortable, but then he got a little bit arrogant, but not too bad out of hand. So there is a few pros, there is a few cons, but overall I think it's a solid hire. And what I was talking about earlier with the no identity on offense, we went ahead and got Matt LaFleur, someone who we interviewed for the head coaching position, but he didn't get it. So I guess Matt LaFleur is like All-State. I'm guessing considering him calling our offensive plays, we're in good hands.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of you, and I said it last week. I do have some reservations, and it's the same thing that you just said about Vrabel. Is he's had this meteoric rise where he hasn't spent very long in any position that he's been in. Even at Ohio State, moves from linebackers to defensive line, then he gets in the NFL as a linebackers coach for a couple years, and then he's a defensive coordinator for 1 year. Now he's a head coach, so he hasn't had a lot of time to build that experience. Now, what you can argue also, he's been around football and pro football especially for decades now. I mean, the guy obviously had a very great playing career with Pittsburgh, with New England. So he has that to fall back on. He has a lot of experience around the game, but coaching is different. There's a lot more to it on the back end of things, and getting ready, talking players into coming here, that kind of stuff, and so. My first gut reaction was I wasn't huge on the hiring. I was kind of, I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. I'm starting to come around a little bit more. He's definitely, we heard Robinson say, leader of men. I mean, Vrabel's that guy. Vrabel's like the picture of that guy if you're looking for that leader of men type. So we'll see how he does, but I am coming around on it a little bit more. I'm starting to like Mike Vrabel a little bit more. But a lot of what you said I agree with, Cody. But you brought up Matt LaFleur, and that's the first guy we're going to talk about. So first thing before I get into LaFleur, I wanted to say this. A couple weeks ago, on this show, people were talking about LaFleur and asking about him, and I was like, we're not getting Matt LaFleur. He came in to interview for a head coaching spot. He's already an offensive coordinator. We're not going to pay him a lot more than he's making, so why come? And why come over? I still don't know why. I have no idea why you make the jump.
I actually have a good feeling about why he did that,
All right,
to
let
be
me hear it.
completely honest with you. And I agree with you. Back whenever people were floating that around a little bit along with him and John DeFlippo, I was thinking, no way Matt LaFleur is going to come to another job where he's going to have the same title. But if you really think about it, you look back at his past, what he's done with RG3 in his rookie year, what he did with Matt Ryan, quarterback coach, who was MVP of the league that year, and what he did turning Jared Goff from one of the worst quarterbacks, if not back in the league, to making the Pro Bowl the next year. I believe this job would be a fast track for him to get a head coaching job. So I don't think he'll be around here very long if he gets Mariota turned around. Given the rest of his track record, he won't be with Tennessee very long. He's going to get him a head coaching job. This is just a fast track to it.
That's a great point. And, that's one of the things that I have listed as like a downside for for him is that I don't think he'll be here long. If he has success with Marcus Mariota, I think LaFleur's going to move on to a head coaching job, and I think he'll have no problem finding it. That's one issue that I have with him, is I don't think Matt LaFleur will be here for very long. I think we'll be replacing him, within the next 2-3 years. It's easy to see that, especially if Marcus comes back, has a great year this year. It could be a 1 year now. But still, we ended up getting him, so I kind of had to, eat my own words there, because I was like, there's no way that's happening. But we did get Matt LaFleur. Last season, he was with the LA Rams, obviously, as their offensive coordinator, where they ranked first in offensive scoring, 10th in total offense. Obviously, he's kind of known as a guy who's a quarterback guru. He's worked with Jared Goff, Matt Ryan, RG3, in RG3's rookie year, like you were just saying. All fantastic. So this was obviously a hire that was meant to come in and work with Marcus to make Marcus more successful and help Marcus mature and get that system around him that he needs in order to take the next step. So this is, for me, a really good hire. I like this hire a lot. I didn't think it was going to happen, and it did, and he's obviously a guy I think that can come in. Also you can say experienced, not very experienced, but his track record I think speaks for itself, and I'm excited to see LaFleur in Tennessee, and I think he's going to do great things with Marcus. What do you think?
Exactly. If you're having to replace your coordinators every few years, it means you're doing something right. Well, I guess it could mean you're doing something wrong if you're having to fire them. But if they're moving into head coaching jobs like the Patriots coordinators, if they're moving up into head coaching jobs, it means your organization is definitely doing something right. As far as LaFleur, I think he's going to be great for Mariota, but this system isn't going to be the same as the Rams system or as the Falcons system. The Rams system is Sean McVay's system. He's an offensive-minded coach as well, and Matt LaFleur is just kind of running his system. The system that he implements in Tennessee, that's going to be Matt LaFleur's. Of course, Vrabel is going to have a little bit of a hand in it and help adjust a few things, but for the most part, what our offense is going to look like this year is going to be what Matt LaFleur sees and what he wants out of his offense. This is going to be built from the ground up by him, where his past offenses weren't.
All right, that's a great point. And we were talking before the show about Vrabel and being involved in the offense, and that both kind of scared us a little bit about, to getting too involved and wanting too much control of your team. We've seen that from coaches in the past. That becomes an issue. You want too much control of your team, and you end up, limiting some really talented guys that you have in your coaching staff. Hopefully that's not the instance here, but I really like this hire. I think that we really knocked it out of the park. I think he's going to do great things. And you're right, when you have a very successful system, like you see right now with the Patriots that you brought up, they're losing their offense and defensive coordinator. Both are going to head coaching jobs. So when you have a successful system, coaches are going to leave so they can move up, and you got to keep finding new guys. One of the millions of reasons why it's so hard to be successful long term in this league. But both of us big on LaFleur. The next guy here, Pat O'Hara, was hired as a quarterback coach actually before we hired LaFleur. For those that don't know Pat, Had a really fantastic Arena Bowl career. He played in 5 Arena Bowl championship games. He won 3 of those. He was in a training camp quarterback for a while for a couple of teams, and spent 1 season as a third-string quarterback, but never saw any action in a real game. Then after his career, he coached in Arena League, but has only spent 3 years as an offensive assistant in the NFL, all 3 of those years with Houston. So this is his first role as a quarterback coach. This is kind of what I'm seeing like as a trend here, and we're going to talk about it, and we'll keep talking about it as the show goes on, is a lot of guys with very limited experience. So far, we've talked about 3 coaches, and Vrabel and our head coach, LaFleur and our offensive coordinator, and O'Hara as our quarterback coach, and all 3 of them were talking about this lack of experience. They do not have a lot of NFL experience, and I know you want to get guys that aren't set in their ways yet, but it's a little scary that we have this much limited experience so far, and there's a lot more to come for sure.
Yeah, back to what we was talking about with Vrabel, talking about offensive stuff, wanting to have too much control, and then Pat O'Hara gets hired as a quarterback coach who had no experience, and I looked at this, and I was starting to get a little bit nervous. I was starting to get a little worried, and then we got Matt LaFleur as our offensive coordinator. So that calms me, that puts me back at peace, but I expect he'll do all right as long as Matt LaFleur is overseeing things. That it shouldn't be too big of an issue, and he might turn out to be a great coach. He just hasn't had the chance to prove himself. It's just you want somebody with experience overseeing him and making sure that he's not messing up too bad.
Absolutely, that's a big thing is you want to get, and I was the same as you. I'll say that. I was the same as you when we hired O'Hara. I was like, oh man, this is a guy that has like almost no NFL experience. He's coached a lot in arena football. He does have a lot of football experience, but the NFL obviously is a different animal than Arena League, and that worried me. And then getting LaFleur really helped me, calm down. All right, we got a guy that I have some faith in. But overall, I think O'Hara, I've looked at his Arena League, and I really try to dissect it and see how quarterbacks did under him, and for the most part they seem really good, and you see upticks in their career when they're under Pat O'Hara. So that seems promising. We'll have to see. This is his first stint, like we said, as a quarterback coach. See how he does, and I think he's going to come in and learn a lot from LaFleur, and I think LaFleur's going to really be the true quarterback coach on this team as well as the offensive coordinator. But I think Pat O'Hara, can come in. If he can learn a lot, then when LaFleur does leave, we have a guy at quarterback coach that we can have some faith in. But interesting fun fact, and we were talking about this before the show, Cody. If you've ever seen the movie Waterboy, and they face, the University of Louisiana is the evil team, the bad team in the movie. Pat O'Hara played the quarterback in that movie. He also plays a small part in Any Given Sunday. That doesn't affect his coaching at all, but it is kind of interesting to have a quarterback coach with some little bit of Hollywood roles right there on him. But overall, I'm weary about Pat O'Hara, but if he gets under LaFleur and he learns, I think we'll have a guy that's going to, blossom into a really good quarterbacks coach.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's a trade and it can be taught, so hopefully it all works out for him.
Absolutely. On to the next guy is a guy that I'm going to just be honest, I'm not really happy about this hiring. I just don't really understand it. Rob Moore was hired as our wide receivers coach. He's a former Raiders wide receivers coach, also spent some time with the Bills. He had an up and down coaching career. If you think about the guys he's coached, Crabtree has had his second half his career, with Rob Moore. It's been fantastic. He was a guy that's kind of looking like, man, you could almost call him a bust, and now he's having, the best years of his career. And Amari Cooper, who had that one fantastic year, but he looked really bad last year. The drops have been consistently, a problem. Sammy Watkins is a guy that's had an up and down career, and with Rob Moore, it's been real up and down. But you can attribute a lot of that to injuries. We were talking about Robert Woods is a guy that he worked with who really outplayed where he was drafted for sure. He's not a guy that you would talk about elite by no means, but I believe he's like a 6th round pick or something like that. So. definitely works some magic there. It's real up and down. It's not a great coaching pedigree for sure. It's not a great run. It's like we keep saying with LaFleur. The proof is there. His record speaks for himself. That's not what's happening with Rob Moore. It's just not nearly as impressive. He was a really good player in his day. He was a first-team All-Pro selection during his play career 1 year. Went 2 different years to the Pro Bowl. Was also the leading receiver in 1997, the year that he was an All-Pro selection. So definitely a guy that knows how to play this position. Seems like he, for the most part, knows how to coach it. It's just not a guy I'm really big on. I don't hate this hiring, but I really don't like it either.
Yeah, it's totally understandable. It kind of goes back to what you said the very first show I was on with you, where you said great players don't make great coaches, average players make great coaches. But I feel like he's going to be all right. Like you mentioned, Crabtree, who's revitalized his career under him, and Cooper, I'm just talking about most recent stuff he's done here. Cooper, drops were a concern for him when he was first coming out of the University of Alabama. But he's had some good years. He's had some bad years, very up and down. But that whole Raiders offense has struggled. They got the highest paid offensive line there in Oakland, and it struggled. Derek Carr struggled as a result. Marshawn Lynch, he never looked like the same beast mode he did back in Seattle. So I don't want to pin it all on him, but there was some bad drops that Cooper did make. But overall, that whole offense struggled there in Oakland.
No, that's definitely true. And I definitely collected some money this offseason. As soon as the season ended, I should say, because of a lot of Marshawn Lynch fans that I bet Marshawn would not have the season they thought he was going to have. But anyway, moving back in Titans related, here's one thing that scares me about Moore. You look at his track record with young receivers, and this is important for Tennessee because obviously with Corey Davis, we have a guy that was drafted really high that we expect a lot from at the wide receiver position. Sammy Watkins and Amari Cooper, guys that were drafted really high that their teams expected a lot from, and both of them very up and down careers. A slow start for Corey Davis out of the gates. He had an okay season, ending it with he was like the only player that had a good game in that New England Patriots game. Getting 2 touchdowns in that, so ended off strong, but we really didn't see, there was a large part where he missed a lot of games, and then we really didn't get to see that elite level that we thought, although, you can also blame a lot of that on the play calling and the offense for sure, but we're ready for Corey Davis with Marcus Mariota to take the next step. Next year, I think a lot of us are expecting Corey Davis to take that next step, so we have a guy coming in that has a rocky track record when it comes to working with elite-level young receivers, and he's going to work with an elite-level young receiver. So, that part scares me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And another thing is I think this offense is going to change, and it's going to be a lot different, but I still don't expect it to be a pass-heavy offense. I still think we're going to be a run-first team, just maybe not as much because that's how our team is built. But we definitely got to be able to keep defenses honest. If we want to stretch the field, we have to have that ability. It's just an element to the game, and you got to have all the elements in the game to put a full game together. If you can't do that, defenses are not going to respect you, and that's something that we have to be able to do.
I want to say it was Jim White that I heard talking the other day. It might have been. But anyways, it said a line that I really liked and I wanted to bring up is, talking about next year and what we're going to look like when it comes to offense. And they said, I believe it was Jim. If not, I'm sorry for whoever did say that. I'm forgetting who you are. But they said we're going to run the ball a lot, but we're not going to have to rely on the run like we did last year. This past season we had to rely on the run to have success. Next year we're going to be a running team, but we're not going to have to rely on the run, or at least that's the hope, with this new coaching staff, is we're going to be able to win football games when we need to pass, because we didn't have a lot of games where that was necessarily true. But yeah, what you said is correct. we're still going to be a running team, but we're going to have to make some moves through the air. We're going to have to make chunk plays just like every other team in the NFL. Corey Davis is going to be a big part of that, or hopefully will be a big part of that, and we need him to mature. So bringing in a guy that has a rocky track record with these first-round wide receivers, rubbed me the wrong way a little bit, but hopefully, given the talent that we have around him, he'll do fine. And speaking of a guy that we have around him that I do like, is Arthur Smith, our tight ends coach. He is the only guy so far on our staff that coached for the Titans last year that came back. So far he's the only guy that has gotten his job back. He's been the Tennessee Titans tight end coach since the middle. It's actually a little. He coached 9 games in the 2015 season, so a little more than half that year, and has been in that role ever since. He's not a guy that's like. You probably don't even know his name unless you're a dedicated fan to the team. But since he's come in, you have Delanie Walker as a guy that, Smith is probably learning just as much from Delanie Walker as vice versa. But Smith has earned some high praise from a lot of guys. He comes in, he's working hard, he studies hard to get to know this job. And, he was just kind of thrown in there. And he's done an excellent job. If you look at him, you look at what we're able to do when we bring in backups. Fasano is a great backup for us. Supernall had a better season this year than he did the previous year for sure. Not nearly as many mental mistakes. Came up with a couple big plays throughout the season when we needed them. And then you look at John, who had some huge plays this year when we needed them. Had a pretty solid season coming in as a rookie. Especially he had the big jump from a small college to the big-time NFL. So, Smith's work, even though he's working with talented guys, he has made a lot of these backups and a lot of these, young guys like Smith better. And, Arthur Smith has done a good job. He's a guy that I like on this coaching staff, and I'm glad that we brought him back. Also a guy, from everyone I've talked to around the Titans organization, a guy that preaches physicality every day, which is obviously something you love to hear if you love Titans football.
Yes, exactly. And I don't know too much about the guy. I haven't really looked in his past or anything. He's a great coach. We have Delanie Walker, and those two have a certain chemistry together. You don't want to break that up. You want as much continuity as you can get, and especially going through all these changes that we're going through. So that's a good thing to have. Plus, Delanie Walker is another set of eyes and another set of ears to help these younger players like Jonnu Smith, something that the team wanted from Harry Douglas and Eric Decker. It's just Delanie can do that, but also lead by example by putting up those elite-type numbers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And a guy like Arthur Smith coming in and you're thrown into this role, not an ideal situation to get a promotion, but when you have a guy like Delanie Walker that is a leader, that is a fantastic player on the field, and is so smart, it makes it a lot easier. I'm sure that he's really glad that he had Delanie for these the few years that he's been in this position. And I've wondered to myself, since this hiring, because we know Delanie's not a guy that's, going to bite his tongue. He's going to say how he feels. He's going to talk to people and then say what he wants. I wondered if Delanie had anything to do with Arthur Smith coming back, because they supposedly have a pretty close relationship. So I was wondering if, did Delanie maybe call up Vrabel and be like, look, bring this guy back, or, call up John Robinson and be like, look, I want to play again with Arthur. He's a great guy, whatever. And because it's not unrealistic to think that if you hear that from, and you're John Robinson or you're Vrabel, and you think this guy's one of the leaders of this football team, let's look at this guy seriously. Let's look at this coach seriously and make a decision. Obviously, you're going to do that when you have a guy that's been one of the best tight ends in the league, one of the leaders in your football team. So I've been wondering that, but, so far I've gotten no word if it had any effect or no effect on the rehiring of Smith, but I am glad that he's back.
Yeah, you look at it, the cornerstone pieces of a team, the players-wise, the leaders, the cornerstones, the guys that you depend on week in and week out, they do have a say on this. I just saw this today that Aaron Rodgers' quarterback coach was fired or is getting replaced, and Aaron was a little bit upset that he wasn't in the know that they didn't come and talk to him about this beforehand, and he was a little bit surprised. So those type of things, when you got a player like that, a player that your team really depends on, he gets a little bit of a say on who his coaches are going to be.
Absolutely right, and Delaney Walker should. He's definitely earned that right. It's rarefied air. That doesn't just come just because you're a good player or just because you're a leader. You kind of have to be the complete package. There's probably only Delaney and maybe Casey on this team that you would really give that already to, the right to have the kind of the say and who comes in and who doesn't. But moving on to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm very excited to talk about this defensive roster. We had some guys that I was questionable about, but for the most part, I love defensive hires. Don Pease is a guy that I've loved for a long time. He's a guy that I've always liked his defensive style. And spent the last 10 years as a defensive coordinator at the NFL level. 6 of those 10 years, his defense is ranked in the top 10. We're talking about records that speak for themselves. When you spend 60% of your coaching career as a top 10 unit, your record speaks for itself. I've heard a lot of people talking too. I wanted to mention this real quick about the 3-4 and 4-3. Pease comes out of a 3-4 system. Vrabel came, from Houston out of a 3-4 system. I don't think there's any likelihood that we change to a 4-3 system. I don't think we have 2 coaches that are, they got guys that coach the 3-4 that, that's where they do their best work. So I don't think there's any likelihood that we change. And I think most fans know this. You're probably listening to this at home being like, yeah, no shit, Ryan. But I've heard a lot of talk about it, so I wanted to address it real quick. But back on the Dan Pease, he's an excellent football coach, an excellent defensive mind. If you were paying attention last year in the second half of the season, the Baltimore Ravens had, in my opinion, and bar none, including Jacksonville, the scariest defense in the league. The last, especially 5-6 weeks, and maybe excluding that last game for Baltimore, that defense was downright scary. They were nasty. I believe from week 8 on, they were leading every statistical category for a defense. They really came together. And if you think about the guys, they have some strong players on defense, but there's no real superstars on that defense. There's no real, fantastic players. And that's kind of where Tennessee finds themselves right now is Jarrell Casey's, an unreal talent. But outside of that, we have Kevin Byard, who's up and coming, really broke out this year. And we have, Adoree Jackson, who's young and had a solid year. A guy like Avery Williamson, who's a heck of not Avery Williamson, Wesley Woodyard, who's had a solid career and had a really good year last year. There's pieces, but there's no, outside of Casey, no real superstars. There's no, guys that are crazy, crazy talented and have been for a while. I think Byard is crazy talented, but, over a period of time. So Dean, we've seen do this with Baltimore. Take a squad that is solid and make them fantastic. I'm really excited about this hiring. I think he's an excellent hire here. How do you feel, Cody?
Oh, I completely agree. Dick LeBeau's shoes are hard to fill, but this guy's probably the best candidate to fill those shoes. And I was really surprised that we got him. He comes with a lot of experience. He started out as a linebacker coach with the Ravens before he became defensive coordinator, and that Ravens linebacker unit had 5 undrafted players on it who played sizable roles, who played good roles, who produced and had solid games and a solid season. So I find that very impressive. And then they had 3 who played sizable roles and had solid production. They had 3 of those guys who were drafted in the 3rd round or later. So I have a feeling that our linebackers are going to take a big jump forward. And you also look at Vrabel, who's also a former linebacker and a former linebacker coach. I think our linebackers are going to be very, very good next season. I expect our defense to be scary. And I can't remember if it was Vrabel or Dean Pease who said this. He said our defense is technically a 3-4, but we run a lot of a 4-3. Or he might have said our defense is a 4-3, but we run a lot of 3-4. So it's going to be very versatile. And just like Vrabel said in his press conference, we're going to be a task multiplicity front. A lot of guys doing a lot of different things, a lot of different looks. So I expect our defense to be fairly more complicated next season, a lot more creative, and probably it's going to be a lot more fun to watch as well.
Oh, yeah, Pease is definitely a fan of that multiple front. And I said this last week when I was talking on the show. this 3-4 and a 4-3, it really doesn't matter. Most teams run all teams, not most. Every team in the NFL runs both. If you really look at it like play by play, like if you think about the Tennessee Titans, we'll have 3 defensive linemen that are, have defensive lineman numbers that are defensive linemen on the roster. But then it depends. You have Derek Morgan coming on the line. You have Arakpo playing up on the line. So most of the time there's still 4 guys on the line. You can do more out of a 3-4, and if you have athletic guys on the outside that can make plays and in the running game and can cover when they need to and stuff, it makes perfect sense to do it because it makes your defense faster. I'm a fan of the 3-4 system, but you still you show multiple fronts. Every team does, and P's a huge fan of this. Like, no 2 plays from him look alike on defense. It's really hard for offenses to predict what he's going to do. They kind of just have to run their thing and hope it works. And I mean, he's an excellent football coach when it comes to that. He really is hard to predict.
Yeah, I believe it was leading the league in turnovers. I can't swear to it. I read the stat, and there was 2 of them that was really good. And I think the Ravens last season led the league in turnovers and confusing quarterbacks, being complicated on the defense, showing a lot of different looks. That's how you get those turnovers. You don't necessarily have to have the best, the most athletic to do that, but confusing quarterbacks is how you're doing that. And with his 40-some-odd years experience, he's got a pretty good idea on how to do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, we're talking about these guys that we do like LaFleur, like Pease, like Arthur Smith. We've been talking about these guys we really like. There might not be another guy that I like more than this next guy on our list. And I told you that before the show, Cody. I'm really high on this guy, and that's Kerry Coombs, coming from Ohio State University to be our defensive back coach in Tennessee. He is a guy that I love. I love this hiring. I think it's the best hiring that we had in all of our coaches. And if you're not familiar with the name, you will be soon. He's been an exceptional coach at every level he's ever been at. In college with Ohio State, a fantastic coach in the Ohio area. And high school football, he's a legend in high school football in Ohio. And fantastic. This will be his first time jumping the NFL, but experience is not an issue with this man. He spent the last 36 years coaching high school and college football. And I know I always say on this show, it's a different animal, and it truly is. But this might be the only instance that I'll ever, I have zero worries about him not coaching in the NFL. He's an absolutely amazing football coach. And you look at the guys that come out of his system. Marshawn Lattimore came out last year. Garyon Conley also came. Every single year that he's been in Ohio State, he has guys taken in the first round, in the second round, in the third round. He has produced so many talented, unreally talented defensive back since his time in Ohio State. I mean, his record truly speaks for itself. That's my motto today, evidently. But I mean, he's a fantastic football coach. And at Ohio State, they really made Ohio State, DBU. Everybody says that, and it's 100% true, and it's because of Coombs. Now, when you bring in a guy like this to a team like Tennessee, where secondary has been a struggle for us for quite some time now, and we have young guys back there like LaShawn Sims, like Adoree, like Bayard. You have young guys back there as that's your 3 of your 4 starters are within a couple years of being drafted, and you bring in a guy like Coombs that has so much talent at getting these young guys prepared for the next level, and he's going to come and work with these guys. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what he can do with this secondary. I'm excited to see the shape that a lot of these young guys are going to be in. I mean, it's an exciting time, and I think this might be our best hire.
I completely agree. I absolutely loved this hire. It was great. Think about it. Last year, he had 2 cornerbacks and a safety drafted in the first round. And I can't remember exactly where Garyon went, but 2 of those went in the top 20 picks. And Marshawn Lattimore, he was probably my favorite prospect outside of Myles Garrett, of course, coming out of last year's draft. I loved Marshawn Lattimore. I preached all offseason. If Lattimore stays healthy, he's going to be a Pro Bowl cornerback. And not to toot my own horn, but I was right. He shut dudes down all season long this year. He's got another guy coming up, Denzel Ward, who's likely to be another first-round pick. And Denzel Ward and Adoree Jackson both have a lot of things in common. They're both a little bit undersized, and they're both highly, highly athletic. So that should be a smooth transition. Adoree should really benefit from having this guy, as well as Kevin Byard. Really, our whole secondary is going to benefit from this guy, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. We'll probably have more turnovers. We won't have the other team's wide receivers running open down the field like we've had in previous years. You really couldn't have gotten any better than this, in my opinion.
No, I don't think you could have. I think this was the best coach, and you never get to say that because there's so many coaches at so many levels, in so many places. But I think you couldn't have gotten a better hire at this position. I love this guy. And then he came out and he said they asked him why, because he talked about not wanting to leave Ohio. He coached high school football in Ohio. He coached at Ohio State. He never really thought that he'd ever leave Ohio, so they asked him, why now? Why make this choice now? And obviously, the connection with Vrabel had something to do with it, but he said, I won state championships, I've won a national championship, and to win a Super Bowl, that's going to be something a few guys have ever done. That's why I'm coming. And that's says it all. He's coming to win a Super Bowl. I love hearing stuff like that. I love a guy that's going to come in. He's going to be dedicated. He's going to be ready. He's going to get these guys in a shape to where we have the ability, to go play at that level where we're true contenders. I think if we were putting grades on these, which we're not, this would be like an A++++. I love Kerry Coombs. I think this is a great hire. But moving on to the next one here. Terrell Williams going to be our defensive line coach. 6 years of experience at the defensive line position in the NFL. 15 years of experience as a defensive line coach in college. He's never worked a different position. You rarely see coaches like that. He's never once been like an assistant or a linebackers coach or anything. He's just been a defensive line coach. But you kind of like that. You're talking about 21 years of specialization that this guy's had, where he's only been a defensive line coach. He's had a lot of success. He spent 2 of those years at Texas A&M, where in those 2 years had very stout defensive lines. He's a very, very. I think he's going to be a solid coach, and he comes into a unit with really 1 star, and he's surrounded by guys that are averagely talented. And I love Carl Klug. Carl Klug's like the patron saint of this show. But Carl Klug is a guy that has average talent. He just has all the hustle and heart in the world, and it makes him seem a lot more talented than he is. But it is Jarrell Casey superstar, and then a bunch of guys that are just averagely talented. So getting more talent in the defensive line is obviously, we've been talking about it all year, leading up into this offseason, and I'm sure we're going to beat it into the ground until draft time. It's definitely something we have to do, is get more talent. But bringing in a guy like Terrell Williams, I think is a good hire. I think he's a guy that, can get these guys that are averagely talented that we have to become, good. When you do that, is what separates good teams from bad teams. Any bad team can draft a guy that's fantastic and watch him play fantastically. Any team in the NFL can do that. Where you win Super Bowls is finding those guys in the 6th round, finding those Tom Brady's, finding those Richard Shermans, finding those guys like Terrell Davis that go undrafted or are drafted late and turning them into really good players is how you win Super Bowls. I think Terrell Williams is a guy that we're going to really like having around. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to make this defensive line better.
Yeah, I don't know too much about him. I know that he was there with Miami for the last 2 years. He had Cameron Wake and Ndamukong Suh there. And I know they did struggle a little bit over there in Oakland while he was there. Dan Williams didn't really pan out the way they had hoped he would. They had Khalil Mack, but that's just somebody, top 5 draft pick. He's going to be ultra talented, of course. So I don't know too much about him. I ain't necessarily crazy about it, but it's kind of like the Mike Vrabel. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. And Tony Romo really pointed out we don't only need more talent on our defensive line, we need more depth on our defensive line. And that's something that a lot of Titans fans, myself included, didn't even realize until Tony Romo looked at the tape and pointed it out himself.
No, it's definitely something we've talked about on the show before. Back when Glenn was still on the show, obviously a guy that played defensive line all growing up and then in college. Glenn has been talking about it for a while. And so it's something that's been, in the back of my mind for quite some time is our lack of depth at the defensive line position and our lack of talent. I think I'm a little higher on Williams than you are. I'm not in love with the guy, but I do like him. I think it was a solid hiring. So I'm a little higher than you, but I hopefully we're both wrong and he's just like through the roof fantastic. But as of right now, I think it was a solid hire. I think he'll be successful, especially with we're gonna get an influx of talent on the defensive line. We know that's going to happen in this offseason. You mix that with the fact he's going to be working with guys like Coombs and Peace and Vrabel. He's probably going to be successful even if he's not the best at his job.
Right, and of course, Mike Vrabel, he also spent time as a defensive line coach, not only as a linebackers coach. And, of course, you got Dean Pease. You got me messed up. He's going to be there, too.
That.
So it's going to be all right. I think our defense is going to be – it stepped up this past year. I think it's going to take another step up again this year. But you got to remember, it's new coaches that we're going to have this year. So there's definitely going to be a learning curve, and that's also on the offensive side of the ball, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Dean Pease. I keep saying Dan. But, no, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Next guy we got to talk about here, inside linebackers coach, Tyrone McKenzie, there. He was a special teams coach with the Rams, come over to the Tennessee Titans to be our inside linebackers coach. I don't know a lot about this guy from what I read. He's a high intensity kind of guy. And that's all. He's, a good thing for an inside linebackers coach. And we have two guys, at inside linebacker that are both pretty good, not great. Obviously, Wesley Woodyard had a fantastic season this year. But over the last, if you combine the last, 3-4 years that they've both been here together, it's good, not great. That's pretty much where it's at. Both great run stoppers, really struggle in the passing game. We bring in a guy, in Jayon Brown, that, did good for us in the passing game this season. I like McKenzie. Everything that I've heard from